Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on From the South. This morning, we're going to begin in Mexico. That's where the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein, said that from December 2006 to August of this year, more than 151,000 people have been killed there in Mexico. Now, he also said 27,000 more remain disappeared. Al Hussein condemned the 98% impunity rate in the country. The UN official calls on the government to accept criticism and to take steps to deal with what he calls a very grave crisis of human rights in Mexico. The human rights defender met with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto and asked for him to gradually remove military forces from public safety operations.
Many of the issues raised by my predecessor 4 years ago remain of concern, and many of the people I have spoken to painted a very bleak and consistent picture of a society that is racked by high levels of insecurity, disappearances and killings, continuing harassment of human rights defenders and journalists, violence against women, and terrible abuses of migrants and refugees transiting the country on their way to the United States.
And now we go to our correspondent in Mexico, Clayton Kahn, who has more on that crisis of human rights in Mexico, where torture and enforced disappearances are common practice.
After 3 days of meetings with officials and rights groups, UN Rights Commissioner Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein gave his critical report on Mexico's human rights.
And many of the people I have spoken to painted a very bleak and consistent picture of a society that is racked by high levels of insecurity, disappearances and killings, continuing harassment of human rights defenders and journalists, violence against women, and terrible abuses of migrants and refugees.
Meanwhile, the official reaction to Demian reports by international organizations has been to internally refute them, while at the same time applauding legislative measures that are a result of international pressure that at least rhetorically defend human rights and champion a transparent and responsible government.
At times we forget, we omit and let it pass, because at times our memory is short. But if we try to visualize Mexico 30 years ago, 20 years ago, we were a government authentically closed.
Yet, human rights defenders say that it is in fact the lack of transparency and impunity that continues to be a root cause of Mexico's human rights crisis, pointing to inaccurate data and statistics and opaque information gathered by the authorities.
I believe the problem crosses into issues of transparency, secrecy inside the local public prosecutor's offices, secrecy inside the Attorney General's office, secrecy by local courts, which impedes those of us worried about structural issues, even though we have a clear idea of what we are living here in Mexico.
Ultimately, civil society rights defenders argue that a militarization policy of Mexico's so-called war on drugs and systemic corruption sustain the human rights crisis. They also say that while there may be a degree of political legislative will to tackle the crisis, there's a complete lack of will to put these measures into practice. Clayton Kahn, Telesur, Mexico City.
Moving on now with the annual meeting of the World Bank and the IMF taking place in Lima, Peru. The alternative event, Belling the Peruvian Miracle, is also underway. Our correspondent Raul Mora now with more.
The small team of investigative journalists called Convoca has released a report on environmental contamination just in time for the annual IMF and World Bank meeting in Peru. The study shows how companies in the hydrocarbon sector, which received the most financial support from the World Bank, committed grave environmental violations, damaging areas of the country.
What we want is to highlight with these investigations and the World Bank is that their investments have to have more firm environmental and social safeguards, because it is not possible that the bank can finance projects but then disengage from them and not have power to make sure the companies comply with the responsibilities here in Peru.
The companies that committed the most violations are US-based Newton, Hunt Oil, and Maple. Other researchers are also criticizing the proportion of investments the World Bank and the IMF have secured for development programs compared to the amounts to protect the environment in the same areas.
Looking at the investments in the hydrocarbons and infrastructure that together add up to $4 billion, it's enough to see what is happening. Confronting those $4 billion makes us realize that $500 million for environmental safety is insignificant.
Since 2009, deforestation of Peru as a result of investment has increased to over 120 hectares a year, and human development measures are lower in those areas where the investments have taken place. However, on the other side of the spectrum, at the annual meeting of the World Bank and IMF, Peru is being presented as a successful model. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
Tense scenes were reported near a Nicaraguan gold mine run by a Canadian company as police attempted to remove union workers there. Now, the new unrest comes a day after violence left a policeman dead and 23 more people injured. The protests are part of an ongoing dispute over union labor that has shut down operations at Canada's B2 Gold Corp mine. Gold mine worker Rodolfo Gonzalez warned violence could increase unless the government resolves the issue. The Canadian company is apparently trying to eliminate all union workers from the site.
We're with the people. The people are supporting us, and we won't give up the struggle. If this not resolve itself, I don't know what would happen. There will be a human slaughterhouse in the town.
Some have mentioned the Colombian peace negotiators as potential winners of the Nobel Peace Prize, which are about to be announced on Friday. President Juan Manuel Santos would receive the prize on the government's delegation side, while FARC commander Rodrigo Londoño, better known as Timochenko, would receive it on behalf of the rebels. Santos and Timochenko recently announced that within 6 months, a final peace agreement to end Latin America's longest-standing internal conflict would be signed. And now just a quick glance at some of the other stories we're covering around the world.
U.S. intelligence analyst Edward Snowden has been mentioned as likely contender for the 2015 Nobel Peace Prize. The final decision will be made in Oslo, Norway this Friday. Other potential candidates are Pope Francis, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and U.S. President Barack Obama, among others. Snowden disclosed secret NSA programs involving the collection of telephone and email data. Snowden is exiled in Russia. He was nominated by the European Parliament members for the 2013 Sakharov Prize.
I did not seek to enrich myself. I did not seek to sell U.S. secrets. I did not partner with any foreign government to guarantee my safety.
European Union governments are set to agree shortly to step up deportations of illegal immigrants among the hundreds of thousands who have failed to be granted asylum. The bloc's interior ministers are currently meeting in Luxembourg. Among other things, they are expected to agree on immediately expelling those they consider to be flight risks. The bloc will also begin talks with Turkey to try to discourage the 4 million Syrians sheltering that country from traveling into EU countries. The EU is expected to have received over 1 million refugees by the year's end. One important point today will be the better protection of the EU external borders. A Europe without secure external borders will be a Europe with internal border checks. We don't want that. That's why the protection of the external borders has to be improved. Syria's military launched a massive offensive in the western region of the country in a bid to take back towns and villages under Islamic State group siege. The Ministry of Defense said that the Russian airstrikes have destroyed a number of vital Islamic State targets. They said the operation aims to liberate areas and towns which have suffered from the crimes of cold terrorists. The Arab countries affected by an internal conflict since 2011, which have led to 250,000 people dead. Today, the Syrian armed forces began a big attack with the aim of wiping out terrorist groups and liberating the areas and towns which have suffered from their crimes. In Yemen, the Saudi-led coalition has attacked civilians for the third time in recent weeks. On this occasion, they killed 13 people at a wedding party in southwestern village. About then, 10 Agos, some 130 civilians were killed at another wedding. In total, the study led airstrikes have left over 2,300 civilians dead since the beginning of their operations on March 26. Over 14,000 have been injured.
A look at sports now. Jamaican athlete Usain Bolt says he is seriously considering retirement by next year. Now Bolt is considered the fastest person ever. He is the first man to hold both the 100-meter and the 200-meter world records. Now he also set the 4x100-meter relay record. He spoke of his remaining career goals, which include winning gold in the 2016 Olympic Games in Brazil.
I have two more goals that I would love to accomplish before I retire, and that's defending my Olympic title 3 times. That's one, and I would love to run sub-19 also. So those are the two big goals that keeps driving me on, that I really want to do next season.
That's what we're covering this morning. Plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. Thanks for being with us for Telesur English. I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.